"Get that crying baby out of here." The words echoed through the elegant ballroom like a slap in the face, silencing the room in an instant. Maddie Taylor, 8 years old and blind, stumbled forward, her tiny steps uncertain as she wandered closer to the edge of the bustling street outside. Her father, Thomas Taylor, a billionaire CEO, sat oblivious at the table, lost in conversation, his world revolving around power, money, and the deal of the century. The city lights flickered through the windows, casting long shadows over the polished marble floors of the exclusive restaurant. The guests, dressed in their finest, exchanged uncomfortable glances, but none of them moved. Not until a soft voice pierced through the tension. "Let me help." Tasha Williams, a black waitress in a simple uniform, stepped forward. Her hands were steady but her heart raced. She had seen this moment before. People too busy with their own lives to notice the vulnerable, the overlooked. But this time it wasn't just a broken wine glass or a spilled drink. This time it was a life. Maddie, unaware of the danger ahead, walked closer to the traffic, her footsteps slow, deliberate. Tasha had no time to waste. She darted toward the little girl, pushing past tables, knocking over a chair in her haste. Her eyes locked on Maddie as she reached out, pulling the child back just in time. Maddie's startled gasp echoed in the night air, but Tasha's grip was firm, her arms wrapping around the girl with a protective warmth. "Are you okay?" Tasha whispered, her voice calm as she looked around at the stunned faces of the guests, still frozen in place. Thomas Taylor, still unaware of what had just transpired, finally turned toward the commotion, his eyes narrowing as he saw Tasha holding his daughter. A moment of silence passed. Then realization hit him like a punch to the gut. His daughter had just been saved, by a woman he had barely noticed before, a woman who worked for him, but was invisible to his world of luxury and power. The crowd, once indifferent, now turned their eyes toward Tasha, who stood there, her breath steady, her heart racing. She wasn't looking for gratitude. She wasn't waiting for applause. She was simply doing what needed to be done. But in that moment she had done more than just save a child, she had forced a man like Thomas Taylor to see her for the first time, to realize that his wealth and influence couldn't shield him from the truth. Sometimes the people you overlook are the ones who save you when you need it most. As Tasha stood there holding Maddie close, her heart was still pounding in her chest, but she didn't let it show. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint clink of glass as people began to stir. Thomas Taylor slowly stood up from his seat, his eyes locked on Tasha. His expression was unreadable, his face a mask of disbelief. He was used to being in control, to always having the upper hand. But now, for the first time in a long while, he felt a wave of vulnerability crash over him. His daughter, his precious Maddie, had almost walked into traffic, and it was this woman, this waitress, who had saved her. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. He should be angry, he thought. He should be furious that his world had been shaken, that someone like Tasha had been the one to make him realize how blind he had been. But instead all he felt was a strange sense of gratitude, mixed with something deeper. Shame maybe. "Thank you," he finally managed to say, his voice quiet but sincere. Tasha looked at him, her expression still calm. She didn't need to hear his thanks. In fact, she wasn't even sure she wanted them. What mattered now was Maddie, and the fact that she was safe. "She's fine," Tasha said softly, her hand gently brushing Maddie's hair back from her face. The little girl, still a little shaken, clung to Tasha's side, her small hands gripping her sleeve. "You're okay now, sweetheart," Tasha whispered. Maddie nodded, her wide, innocent eyes still filled with confusion and fear. It was clear she didn't fully understand what had just happened, but the warmth of Tasha's embrace seemed to reassure her. "You should go," Tasha said, turning to leave. "She needs to get some rest." But Thomas wasn't ready to let her go yet. He moved toward her, his steps slow, unsure. "Wait," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You saved my daughter. I don't know how to thank you enough." Tasha turned back to face him, her expression still unreadable. She had been taught not to expect much from people like him. People who lived in their mansions and drove their luxury cars, who thought the world was theirs to control. But now, standing in front of her, he wasn't just the CEO of a billion-dollar company. He was a father, vulnerable and shaken. Tasha didn't respond immediately. She simply nodded, her gaze unwavering. She didn't need to hear his words. She didn't need him to offer her money or a reward. What mattered to her, what always had, was the fact that she had done something good in a world that often overlooked people like her. "I'll see myself out," she said quietly. Thomas opened his mouth as if to say more, but no words came out. He was still processing everything that had just unfolded. His mind was racing, torn between the man he was and the man he was starting to become. He had always seen himself as a man of action, a man who controlled his fate. But now, standing here in front of Tasha, he realized how little he had truly been in control of. As Tasha walked away, her footsteps light but purposeful, Thomas watched her. Something had shifted inside him. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he knew this moment would stay with him forever. He had never seen her the way he was seeing her now. He had never truly seen her at all. Days passed, and the memory of that night lingered in the air like the last breath of a storm. Tasha returned to her routine, working tirelessly at the restaurant, her movements precise and effortless. But something inside her had shifted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just crossed an invisible line. She had saved a life, a little girl's life, and in doing so she had forced the world to see her. Not as a waitress, not as someone to be overlooked, but as a person capable of making a difference. Still, she kept her head down, focusing on the work at hand. But people started to notice. The whispers grew louder. At first it was just the staff, those who had witnessed the moment of tension that night. They would nod at her, smile in acknowledgement but say nothing. Then it spread. Customers who dined at the restaurant began to ask about the brave waitress who had saved the CEO's daughter. Tasha felt the weight of it all. She wasn't looking for recognition, but it was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had saved his daughter. He had expected to forget about it, dismiss it as a momentary fluke, but it stayed with him, gnawing at him in the quiet moments. He tried to focus on his meetings, his business deals, but her face kept appearing in his mind, calm and composed, standing in front of him like she was ready to face anything at all. It was a stark contrast to his own world, a world of control, power, and calculation. What did she want? What did she need? Did she need anything at all? Days turned into weeks, and Thomas decided he needed to find out. He made his way to the restaurant one evening, his presence towering over the dining room. The staff immediately recognized him, and whispers traveled quickly through the room. Tasha, who was clearing a nearby table, caught sight of him. She stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. He was here. She wasn't sure what to feel. She had saved his daughter, but what did that mean now? Was he here to thank her, or to do something more? His eyes met hers across the room, and he walked toward her, his steps purposeful, though his expression was guarded. "Tasha," he said, his voice steady but soft. "We need to talk." Tasha stood still for a moment before nodding. She led him to a quiet corner of the restaurant, away from prying eyes. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone neutral, but inside she was already bracing for whatever was to come. "I can't stop thinking about that night," Thomas began, his voice low. "You saved my daughter. And I—" He hesitated, as if the words didn't come easily to him. "I want to make it right. I want to make sure you know how much that meant to me." Tasha looked at him, searching his face for any signs of insincerity. There was none. She had saved his daughter, and now he was here, acknowledging her in a way no one ever had before. "I didn't do it for thanks," she said quietly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Thomas nodded as if he had expected that answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I'm offering you a job," he said. "Not just any job, something meaningful, something that will make a difference. I want you to work for me. I want to make sure your future is as bright as it can be." Tasha's heart skipped again. She had never imagined this kind of offer, especially not from someone like him. But she wasn't ready to just accept it. She needed to think. "I'm not looking for charity," she said, her voice steady. "I'm fine where I am." Thomas looked at her, his expression unreadable. "This isn't charity, Tasha," he said. "This is an opportunity for you to do something bigger. You've already proven you have what it takes. All I'm doing is offering a chance for you to prove it in a way that can change everything." Tasha felt a surge of emotions, but she pushed them down. This wasn't about her. It was about her future, her family. She needed to make the right choice. And she needed time. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice calm. "But I'm not making any promises." Thomas nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything else." He stood up to leave, but before he walked away, he turned back to her. "Thank you again, Tasha. You didn't just save my daughter that night. You saved me from myself." And with that he walked out, leaving Tasha to ponder what came next. Tasha spent the next few days in a haze, her mind swirling with the offer that Thomas had made. At first, she had thought it was just another empty gesture, something born out of guilt and a fleeting sense of responsibility. But the more she thought about it, the more it felt like something she couldn't ignore. This was an opportunity. It wasn't just about the job itself. It was about something deeper. It was about a chance to step out of the shadows to prove to herself, and to the world, that she was more than just a waitress. The idea of leaving her current life behind wasn't easy. She had spent years working at the restaurant, and it had become a part of who she was. It had given her a steady income, a place where she could go every day and do her job without anyone questioning her worth. But she knew she deserved more. Her mind kept coming back to that night, the night when she had saved Maddie. The way the world had frozen around her in that moment, the way she had stepped forward not out of obligation, but because she knew it was the right thing to do. She had made a choice and it had led her to this point. She thought about her son, how hard she had worked to make sure he had everything he needed, even when it seemed like she had nothing left to give. She thought about the long nights, the endless shifts, the moments when she had questioned whether it was all worth it. And then she thought about Thomas. His words lingered in her mind. "You saved me from myself." It wasn't just about gratitude. It was about recognition. For the first time, someone had seen her for who she really was, not just the woman who brought drinks to tables, but someone capable of making a real impact. Felt strange, but in a good way. But as much as she wanted to believe in this new possibility, she knew she couldn't make a decision right away. She needed time to think. Time to understand if this new path was really what she wanted. The next day, Tasha went back to the restaurant, her mind still weighing the options. As she entered the kitchen, she was met with the usual bustle, the clinking of silverware, the sizzle of food on the grill, the hum of conversation. But today something felt different. The staff had noticed her interaction with Thomas. Some offered small smiles, others nodded at her in silent acknowledgement. She wasn't invisible anymore. And while she hadn't yet made up her mind about the offer, she knew something had changed. When her shift ended, she found herself standing outside the restaurant, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. She looked out over the city, the skyline shimmering in the distance. It was beautiful in a way she had never truly appreciated before. For the first time, she felt like she was standing at a crossroads, a moment where everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, could lead her to something more. The question was, what was that something more? Was it the job Thomas had offered her? Or was it something else entirely? The answer wasn't clear yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let fear or doubt hold her back. She had faced too many challenges in her life to back down now. It was time to make a decision that would change everything. Tasha stood at the corner of the street, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the business card Thomas had given her. She had spent the entire night thinking about it, tossing and turning, her thoughts swirling around the offer. There was a part of her that wanted to just walk away from it all, to stay in the safety of her routine where things were predictable. But there was also another part of her, a part that had been buried for so long that wanted more. She had always been a fighter, never backing down from a challenge. But this was different. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. And for the first time she had a chance to do just that. The city was quiet at this hour, the streets empty except for the distant hum of traffic. Tasha took a deep breath and looked up at the tall buildings that surrounded her. The city had always felt like a place where dreams were made, but also where people like her were easily overlooked. She had spent years serving the wealthy, the powerful, but never once had anyone truly seen her. Until that night. Until Thomas had walked into her world and turned everything upside down. She couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. It wasn't just about the gratitude he had expressed. It was about the way he had acknowledged her, not just as a waitress, but as a person who mattered. She had always felt invisible in this world, but that night she had been seen. And now, standing at the crossroads of her life, Tasha realized that this was her moment. She didn't have to settle for what life had given her. She could choose to take control of her future. As she walked back to her apartment, her steps were steady, her heart no longer filled with doubt. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back anymore. The decision wasn't easy, but it felt right. The next morning, she called the number on the business card. Her voice was steady as she spoke, but inside, she felt a wave of nervous excitement wash over her. Thomas answered quickly, his tone warm. "Tasha, I'm glad to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "I've thought about your offer," she said, her voice firm. "And I'm ready. I'm ready to take that chance." There was a brief pause on the other end, followed by a deep sigh. "I'm glad to hear that," Thomas said. "I knew you'd make the right choice. I'll have my assistant send over the details. We'll get started as soon as you're ready." Tasha hung up the phone and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A weight had been lifted from her shoulders, but there was also a sense of anticipation. This was it. This was the beginning of something new, something bigger than she had ever imagined. As she looked out the window at the city below, she knew that she was no longer just a part of the background. She was stepping into the spotlight, ready to show the world what she was capable of. It was time for her to rewrite her story. Tasha's first day at Thomas's company felt like stepping into a world where everything was unfamiliar. The building was massive, a sleek modern skyscraper that stood tall among the others in the heart of the city. The glass walls gleamed under the morning sun, reflecting the hustle and bustle of the streets below. As Tasha walked through the front doors, she could feel the weight of the decision she had made, the weight of all the hopes and dreams she had placed on this moment. She wasn't just here to work. She was here to prove herself. Her new office was on the 23rd floor, and as she entered the elevator, her heart beat faster. She tried to calm herself, but it wasn't easy. She had spent years working in a place where she was invisible, where no one really cared who she was or what she could do. Now she was about to be part of a team that would expect her to be at her best every day. As the elevator ascended, her reflection in the mirrored walls caught her eye. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She was wearing a professional suit, her hair neatly styled, and there was a quiet confidence in her posture. This was a woman who had just made a choice to take control of her future. And she was ready. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out into the sleek, polished hallway. Her new colleagues greeted her with polite smiles, but there was an underlying sense of curiosity in their eyes. Tasha had always felt that way, the outsider, the one who didn't quite fit. But today she wasn't going to let that hold her back. She was here for a reason. She had a purpose. She walked into her new office, a spacious, bright room with a view of the city that took her breath away. The desk was simple but elegant, with a few personal touches, a framed photo of her son and a small plant sitting by the window. She took a deep breath and sat down, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. This was the beginning of something new. For the first time in her life, she was in control. As the day went on, Tasha found herself settling into the rhythm of her new job. The work was challenging, but it was also invigorating. She was surrounded by smart, driven people who expected nothing less than excellence. And for the first time, Tasha didn't feel out of place. She was part of something bigger now. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a woman with a future, with goals, with potential. By the time the workday ended, Tasha was exhausted but proud. She had made it through her first day, and not only had she survived, she had thrived. As she left the office, she couldn't help but smile to herself. This was only the beginning. She still had a long way to go, but she was on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like anything was possible. Tasha walked into the office the next morning with a new sense of purpose. She had made it through her first week, and despite the overwhelming challenge, she felt more confident than ever. The work was demanding, but it was exactly what she had hoped for. Fast-paced, dynamic, and full of opportunities. She had already started to contribute in meaningful ways, solving problems, and offering suggestions that were met with approval from her team. But as much as she was proving herself, there was a lingering feeling that she hadn't quite shaken yet. It was the feeling of being watched, of being tested. She knew it wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about what she represented. A woman from humble beginnings, a single mother, a black woman in a room full of people who had grown up with every advantage. She had to remind herself every day that she belonged here, that her success wasn't a fluke. It was earned. As she sat at her desk working on a report for the next big meeting, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Thomas. "I've been thinking about your progress," it read. "Let's meet for lunch today. I want to discuss your future here." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She had known this day would come. She had no idea what Thomas wanted to talk about, but she couldn't deny that the thought of meeting with him made her feel a little nervous. After all, he had been the one who had given her this chance. He had seen something in her that she hadn't even seen in herself. She wondered if today was the day he would offer her more responsibility, more opportunities, or if it was something else entirely. When lunchtime arrived, Tasha found herself walking to the small cafe near the office, her thoughts racing. She had spent the entire morning thinking about what Thomas might want to discuss. As she entered the cafe, she spotted him sitting at a table near the window, his back straight, his eyes focused on the tablet in front of him. He looked up as she approached, offering a small smile. "Tasha, it's good to see you," he said, standing to greet her. She nodded, her stomach fluttering with nerves. "Good to see you too, Thomas." They sat down, and after a few moments of small talk, Thomas leaned forward, his expression more serious. "I've been impressed with your work," he began. "You've quickly become an invaluable member of the team. Your ideas, your problem-solving skills, they're exactly what we need." Tasha felt a warm flush of pride spread through her chest. But she held herself together, listening intently. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I'm just doing my job." "That's the thing, Tasha," Thomas said, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're not just doing your job. You're changing the game. I've seen something in you that's hard to find. And I think you're ready for more." Tasha's heart raced. "More," she repeated, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "I'm offering you a promotion," Thomas said, his voice firm but kind. "A leadership role. It won't be easy, but I believe you're ready for it. You've already proven that you can handle the pressure, and I think you can do great things here." The world seemed to slow down as the words sank in. "A promotion? A leadership role?" Tasha couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had worked so hard to get here, to prove herself worthy of a chance like this. And now it was finally happening. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her mind racing. "Say yes," Thomas said with a smile. "I've already seen the strength in you. It's just time for everyone else to see it too." Tasha smiled, a genuine wide smile that reached her eyes. She had done it. She had made it. And now she had a chance to rise even higher. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with certainty. "I'm ready." Tasha's first week in her new role felt like a whirlwind. She was quickly thrust into meetings, discussions, and decisions that she never thought she would be a part of. She had been on the other side, serving people who made the big calls, but now she was the one making them. The shift was both exhilarating and terrifying. Every morning, she reminded herself that she belonged here. She had earned this. Her team was small but effective, and they quickly grew to respect her insight. Her suggestions were thoughtful, and her ability to solve problems efficiently impressed even the most seasoned employees. Yet, as the days passed, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. She had climbed this high, but she wasn't sure if the view was as fulfilling as she had imagined. She had worked so hard for this moment, and while she was proud of how far she had come, there was a lingering emptiness in her chest. It wasn't the job that was lacking. It was the connection to the purpose she had once felt when she had taken that leap. She thought back to when she had first walked into this building. It felt like stepping into another world, a world where she could finally be seen. Now, as she sat in her office late one night, going through reports, she wondered if the recognition was enough. Was this really the life she had envisioned? The door to her office opened, and she looked up to see Thomas standing there. He had been in and out of the office for the past week, dealing with high-stakes negotiations, but tonight, he was here to see her. "You've been doing great work, Tasha," he said with a small smile, stepping inside. I've noticed the way you handle things. You've got a real gift. Thank you, Tasha replied, a little surprised by the compliment. She wasn't used to this level of acknowledgement in such an environment. She was used to being just a face in the crowd working behind the scenes. But something tells me this isn't just about the work, she added, putting down the pen in her hand and looking him in the eye. What's on your mind? Thomas's expression softened, as though he had been considering his words carefully. I know what you're feeling, he said, taking a seat across from her. You've worked so hard to get here, and now that you're in a position where you can do something bigger, it feels different. It's a lot of responsibility, and sometimes that can feel isolating. Tasha sat back in her chair listening. She hadn't expected him to understand, but he did. I didn't come from this world, she said, her voice quiet. I've spent my life working to get by, doing whatever it took. I thought that once I made it, things would feel different. But sometimes I wonder if I've made the right choice. Thomas leaned forward, his gaze steady. It's okay to feel that way. Everyone does at some point. The difference is you've got a chance now to shape this role into something that matters, not just for you but for others too. You don't have to be like everyone else. You've got a voice and people are starting to listen to it. Tasha felt a weight lift from her shoulders, though she still wasn't entirely sure what she wanted. She had always been driven by the need to prove herself. But now she was beginning to understand that success wasn't just about reaching the top. It was about finding purpose, connecting with others, and using the platform she had been given to make a difference. I appreciate you saying that, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. I guess I've been so focused on doing everything right, I forgot to ask myself what I really want out of all of this. That's the real challenge, Thomas said with a knowing smile. But you'll figure it out. You're on the right path. As he left her office, Tasha sat in silence for a moment, her thoughts finally slowing down. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead her, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was starting to understand her own path. She wasn't just a part of someone else's plan anymore. She was the one writing the next chapter. And it was time to take control of the story she wanted to tell. Tasha's weeks in her new role continued to unfold, each day bringing new challenges and opportunities. She had settled into the rhythm of her work, and while the initial nerves had faded, there were still moments when doubt crept in. But she had learned to manage it. She had learned to trust herself. The office had become her second home, and the people there, her team. They respected her, they listened to her, and they valued her contributions. And yet there was always a part of her that felt like an outsider, like she was still proving herself. Even though she had risen quickly, she hadn't forgotten where she came from. She still carried the weight of the woman who worked tirelessly just to make ends meet. But now she had a seat at the table. And for the first time she felt like she deserved it. One afternoon as she sat at her desk, working on a proposal for an upcoming project, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Thomas. Let's meet. There's something I want to discuss. Tasha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure what it was about, but it had been a while since they had had a one-on-one meeting. The last time they had spoken, Thomas had shared his faith in her, but now she wasn't so sure. She couldn't help but wonder what this meeting was about. Was he going to challenge her? Was he going to push her even harder? She had already proven herself once, but what did he expect from her now? The thought of it lingered in her mind as she made her way to the meeting room. When she entered, Thomas was already seated, looking over a stack of papers. He glanced up at her as she walked in. Tasha, he said, giving her a smile. Good to see you. She nodded, taking a seat across from him, her heart still racing. Good to see you too, Thomas, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a brief pause before Thomas spoke again. I've been watching your progress closely, he said, his voice calm but firm. And I have to say I'm impressed. You've come a long way in a short amount of time. Tasha could feel her shoulders relax slightly. That was a good sign, right? But there was still something in the air that she couldn't quite place. Thank you, she replied, her voice steady. I'm just doing my best. That's the thing, Tasha, Thomas said, his gaze focused on her. You've been doing more than just your best. You've been leading. You've been making decisions that have moved the company forward. He paused, leaning back in his chair. I think it's time we start thinking about the next step. I want to offer you a bigger role. A more significant leadership position. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. A bigger role? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Thomas confirmed. I want you to take on a larger team, lead new initiatives, and start shaping the direction of the company in a way that only you can. You've shown me that you're ready for this, and I believe you have the potential to lead this company into the future. The words hung in the air for a moment, and Tasha felt a mix of emotions flood through her. She had worked for this, dreamed about it, but now that it was right in front of her, it felt overwhelming. I don't know what to say, she murmured, her mind racing. You don't have to say anything right now, Thomas said with a smile. I just want you to know that the opportunity is there. I believe in you, Tasha. I believe you can take this company to new heights. For a long moment, Tasha sat there trying to process what Thomas was offering her. She had always dreamed of leading, of being the one who called the shots, but now that it was a reality, it felt like too much. She had always been a fighter, always striving for more, but this was different. This was a chance to truly shape her future. And as she looked at Thomas, she realized that she wasn't just doing this for him, or for the company. She was doing this for herself. I'll take it, she said finally, her voice steady with conviction. I'm ready. Thomas nodded, a satisfied look on his face. I knew you were. And with that, Tasha knew her journey had only just begun. This was the next chapter. The one where she would lead not just with her head, but with her heart. She wasn't just a part of someone else's plan anymore. She was making her own. And for the first time in her life, that felt like everything.